Assalamu alaikum, greetings of peace. As is a tradition in events hosted by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we begin today's proceeding with a recitation of the Holy Quran by Muhammad al-Buraki.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على أن لا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. Translation. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Merciful. Chapter 5, Ayah 9. O ye who believe, be steadfast in the cause of Allah, bearing witness in equity, and let not people's enmity incite you to act otherwise than with justice. Be always just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. Thank you for coming. My name is Amjad Mahmood Khan. I serve as National Secretary for Public Affairs for the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA. Also serving on the steering committee of the International Religious Freedom Summit this year. And we're really delighted to be hosting this amazing event with a terrific panel. I wanted to begin by framing the context for this important subject for today. And I think many people in the room are familiar with the plight of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Pakistan and other beleaguered communities in Pakistan as well. This persecution is endemic, it's painful. As I speak here right now, there are well over a dozen individuals who are in prison or are facing imminent prison because of their belief as an Ahmadi. The charges that range in this context are pretty dramatic. Even the sending of a WhatsApp message, a Quranic verse in a WhatsApp message to a friend has become the source of legal prosecution. There is a new digital terrain that makes the daily reality of an Ahmadi extremely shocking. But of course, Ahmadis are not the only community that is suffering in terms of their ability to freely practice their faith. We know that there are documented reports of terrible violence with other communities. The Christian community, the Hindu community, the Hazara Shia community, and many others suffer atrocities. And we as the Ahmadiyya Muslim community stand with them. And we speak for them. That's very important to our community to stand in unison against religious oppression. Today, we funnel in a bit with so much that's talked about with the Ahmadi persecution. It centers largely around blasphemy laws. These criminal ordinances in Pakistan that criminalize the existence of an Ahmadi. In 1984, one of those laws that was promulgated said it's a crime to pose as a Muslim. You can be fined and jailed, and indeed, thousands of people have been prosecuted under this law for posing as a Muslim. What that means is if I'm a Muslim and we just started this event with the recitation of the Holy Quran, I just said, Assalamu alaikum, I'm an Ahmadi. That's an arrestable offense. We cannot offer the very start of this program in any event in Pakistan. In fact, it is so dramatic and jarring that when 86 Ahmadis were massacred in Lahore by the Taliban in 2010, it was world news. It was the largest terrorist attack in the history of Pakistan at that point in time. It was world news. And there was a press conference that had to be done at the Ahmadi Mosque. And the person who was there to lead that press conference, he could not even say Assalamu alaikum to the people who were there at the press conference. He could not even refer to his own mosque as a mosque at the press conference. The press conference, mind you, where he was mourning the death of 86 of his brothers and sisters. There is a surreal reality in Pakistan, and that reality is something that really hits home for us. There's very few degrees of separation between us, the American Ahmadiyya Muslim community, and our brothers and sisters in Pakistan. Now, the laws, of course, and the legal structures of discrimination are aspects that we've covered even last year in our program. But today we talk about something very specific, which may not be as well known, and that is the right to vote. The right to exercise your franchise. The basic ability of any citizen of a democracy is to vote. But the reality for an Ahmadi in voting is really also pernicious. The history of this is very important to note. Pakistan at its founding was very much built on inclusivity and voting freely and jointly for everyone. We know that the Christians and Ahmadis served in government in Pakistan at the inception of Pakistan. Sir Zafrullah Khan, the president of the UN General Assembly and later the Court of Justice, International Court of Justice, was Pakistan's foreign minister. He was an Ahmadi. And of course, Quaid-e-Azam, the founder of Pakistan, put him in the cabinet. We know that all religious communities voted together in unison, alongside each other in every democratic process. Unfortunately, that changed rapidly with the ascension of the regime under General Zia-ul-Haq and President Zia-ul-Haq. The gradual, I would say, rapid at times, but the slow brewing idea that you could declare an entire community to be non-Muslim, like the Second Amendment to the Constitution does, created a situation where Ahmadis could not self-identify as Muslim. And it took 10 years after that for then President Zia-ul-Haq to pass this Ordinance 20 that I mentioned. Now, what happened after that? Well, in 1985, through the 8th Constitutional Amendment, a separate electorate was introduced. This joint electorate that existed was now separated. And there needed to be a separate electorate, according to this new amendment and the laws that surround it, for non-Muslims. So Muslims and non-Muslims became segregated, a sort of religio-political type of apartheid-like system when it comes to the political electorate, just the ability to vote. And that process continued for years. And so an Ahmadi, in order to vote, had to self-identify as not Muslim, because the definition of Muslim in the Constitution was you're not an Ahmadi. So in order to vote, an Ahmadi had to say that, had to basically denounce, not basically, expressly denounce the founder of their own community as an imposter. And then and only then could they be considered to be Muslim, it's a fundamental violation of one's freedom of conscience. And so, therefore, Ahmadis did not vote in that election in 1985. And that has continued. 1988, 1990, 93, 97, 2002, 2008, 2013, and 2018. And we're headed next year to 2023. Ahmadis cannot vote freely or do not vote freely because they cannot call themselves Muslim. But legally, this becomes a very interesting question, because there was such pressure from 1985 until 2002 to remove this separate electorate. And then President Musharraf decided to take a stand and did something. He passed an executive order that said, let's eliminate this. Let's make the joint electorate. And he did. But it lasted for 3 months. I remember those days. I was a first-year law student. And I remember how Ahmadis were very excited that they have the ability now to be part of the joint electorate once again. In fact, there were expats here in America who were registering to vote. Maybe some of you in the hall had registered to vote as a Pakistani in those elections in 2002. But 3 months later, the same President Musharraf passed an order and said that this applies to everyone except Ahmadis. So then you had a truly perverse result. You had a joint electorate for every community and a separate electorate for Ahmadis. And that is the current status quo. Not only is it the current status quo, it has been memorialized in federal legislation in 2017 by Parliament, the Election Act. And now Ahmadis are expressly excluded from the joint electorate and put on a separate roll, auto-enrolled as non-Muslims. And their addresses and phone numbers are included in this annexure list, which essentially serves as a tool for extremists to use that list to attack Ahmadis. Because they know that the only community that's on a separate list are Ahmadis. It becomes a hit list, a target list. This is what we're talking about today, equal citizenship, the ability for Ahmadis to be just equal citizens. We're not talking about repealing the blasphemy laws, although very pernicious. We're not talking about the full and free restoration of all rights of Ahmadis. We're talking about their ability to vote. Why is that important? Because Ahmadis maintain a 99% literacy rate. They're extremely well educated and they love Pakistan. They serve Pakistan at the highest levels. And many hundreds of thousands remain and will not leave even despite this system. So this is the context that I think is very important for you to know, and I thought it would serve a purpose for me to share this. And today, I'm delighted to have a panel of experts, many of whom have spent time in Pakistan, visited Pakistan, know these issues in various contexts. I'm enlisting the support of Mahmood Ahmad, my colleague, who's a lawyer who works on these issues to facilitate the panel discussion in a few minutes. But before I do, I wanted to give our co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Summit for this year, Dr. Katrina Lantos Swett, a few minutes to make some formal remarks, and then she can also join us for the panel. So I turn it over to Dr. Katrina.
Thank you so much, Amjad, and thank you for laying out the issue so beautifully. You know, there have been many blessings that have come into my life as a result of my engagement in the field of international religious freedom, but I don't think any blessing has quite equaled the great happiness it's brought me to become truly good friends, almost family, with many members of this extraordinary community. I am always really struck and inspired by the remarkable spirit of forbearance and forgiveness and integrity with which they face this unrelenting persecution. Amjad spoke and explained very helpfully sort of the legal dimensions and outlines of the outrageous way in which the Ahmadi community is treated in Pakistan. But what we all know, and those of you who don't know can imagine, is that in an environment in which this community is profoundly otherized through the legal system, through the Constitution, through the electoral system, and of course, continually from the pulpit of many, many preachers, they have become a target for violence, for death, for destruction of property, for destruction of their holy sites and buildings. And that makes this remarkable spirit that they carry with them all the more remarkable, all the more admirable, all the more a model to which, frankly, people of every faith community should aspire. It is heartbreaking. It is so heartbreaking to see this unfolding in Pakistan. It is such a betrayal of the vision of the founder of Pakistan, Jinnah, who did envision a society in which all members of the community, including religious minorities, would be welcomed as equal. It is such a betrayal of Pakistan's own interest. Amjad didn't say this. He spoke sort of neutrally about the high levels of literacy, but I, as just a friend of the Ahmadiyya community, can say it's an extraordinary community. They are brilliant and talented and accomplished, and they have contributed at an unbelievable level to the richness of Pakistan. I don't think you mentioned this, Amjad, but Pakistan's only winner of a Nobel Prize, an Ahmadiyya Muslim. A few, maybe 8 months ago, I learned for the first time that the Ahmadiyya community, and this is a reflection of their incredible spirit of service to others, many, many decades ago, maybe a century ago, had missions to the Uyghur community, bringing medical education and uplift and strength to that community. There are so many things that really make the Ahmadiyya community sort of that light on the hill. And how tragic, what does it say about a society that targets a community that really exemplifies the best of humanity and certainly the best of what that country has to offer? I want to say just a quick word about the electoral law, and with all credit to my friend Amjad, because he sort of shared this analogy with me to bring it alive. So I don't know, anybody in this room who's an American citizen, please raise your hand if you voted in the most recent election. Okay, so almost everybody here voted, and maybe the ones who didn't raise your hands, you might not be US citizens, but my guess is we're all voters. And probably every single one of us views it as both a privilege but also a sacred obligation. I'll confess, I'm one of those people, I love to actually go to my polling place. I love that experience of having my name checked off the list and being handed my ballot. In New Hampshire, where I live, we still use paper ballots. Let me just say, they're very good for if you ever have to do a recount. So don't diss the paper ballot. I like seeing my fellow citizens. I like the fact that I'm a Democrat, that I see my Republican friends and we shake hands and we chat and we chuckle and we have a repartee. And I always feel like I'm taking part in one of the special rituals of democracy, something that binds us together as a community. Amjad said to me, imagine that next time you go to the polling place and you're a Catholic, maybe you're a member of the Latter-day Saint Church, and somebody says, well, before you can vote, you need to sign this declaration that you're not a Christian, you're not a real Christian. What would one do? How profoundly offensive it would be, but it's more than profoundly offensive. It suddenly becomes a deep moral conundrum. Because as a person of integrity, my Ahmadiyya friends are devout Muslims. They're the very best that the Muslim community can possibly boast. But in order to be part of that wonderful civic moment and fulfill their civic duty and share in the common guidance of their nation, they're being asked to betray something that goes to their deepest integrity. It's an impossible situation. They are really put in an impossible situation. And I hope that those of us who don't live in a place where we are faced with that kind of embedded saturation of discriminatory, abusive treatment will stop and think the next time that we go to cast our vote. What if I had to disavow my deepest convictions in order to be a good citizen? As Amjad said, there are many, many other ways in which the community is persecuted, but I'm glad we're focusing on this one today. In our country, we've been focusing a lot on elections and election integrity and confidence in electoral processes. And it's a reminder to us that within our lives as shared citizens, it is one of the most important things we do. And so it is yet another example of the profound injustice that our Ahmadiyya brothers and sisters are subjected to, that they have to choose between the devil and the deep blue sea. I'm honored to be with all of you today. I see my dear friend Nasim, who he calls me a sister and I call him a brother, but so many of you are familiar to me. And I also want to just close by saying that I've had on several occasions, a number of occasions, the great privilege of spending time with His Holiness. And I understand better the beautiful spirit of this community when I get to spend time with him and be in his presence, because he's a man of great intellect, but above and beyond that intellect is a wonderful, profound spirit of wisdom and enlightenment, and a great sense of his love for this world and his love for his fellow human beings. And I think it comes down from His Holiness and really does touch the lives of the wonderful members of this community. So thank you for giving me the opportunity for some opening remarks, and I look forward to participating in the panel. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mahmoud Ahmad. I'm here on behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA, and very privileged to be addressing you. We have a really great panel here to speak with you, and I know we're running short on time, so I'll keep my introductions very, very brief. Starting with Knox Thames, who is now at the U.S. Institute for Peace, has served in many distinguished roles, both at the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom within the U.S. Department of State, is obviously one of the foremost experts on religious freedom, and very, very happy to have him here. Next up, we have Farahnaz Ispahani, who probably from most of you will need no introduction. She is a former member of Pakistan's parliament. She is also a fellow at the Wilson Center at the Religious Freedom Institute, and has written about religious minorities in Pakistan, and has a deep, deep abiding knowledge of this subject. Amjad already introduced Katrina, and finally, well, not finally, penultimately, we have Michael Kugelman, who is a Asia Program Deputy Director and Senior Associate at the Wilson Center, manages research and activities on South Asia, is a prolific writer and a member of the Twitterati, and so many of you will see his work on Twitter. And then, indeed, finally, we're very privileged to have with us a outstanding scholar of Islam, Sharif Odeh Sahab, who is the Emir of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community in the Holy Land, in Israel and Palestine, and has graced us with his presence all the way from there. So with that, we have just heard how Pakistan has preconditioned the exercise of virtually every basic right of citizenship upon religious identity. Citizens must be sorted according to religion, because before they are given an identity card, without which Pakistanis cannot access even the most basic needs. When I was in Pakistan most recently, I recall that to even buy a SIM card for a phone, you had to present your ID card. So you really cannot do anything in that country of substance without one of these in your hand. In fact, even to board a flight to go to a different country, which many of you did to come here to this event, you must first declare which faith you owe your allegiance to, because otherwise you cannot hold a passport that allows you to travel. So I want to start by unpacking with each of you how this fixation on sorting Muslims from non-Muslims has affected Pakistan as a country. So Farahnaz, I'd like to begin with you. You're, as I mentioned, one of the foremost authorities on religious freedom, or perhaps I should say the lack thereof, in Pakistan. How have the legal structures predicating access to citizenship rights on the basis of religion impacted Pakistan as a country?
I won't get into the legal structures too much, because I think we've already had that explained to us very, very clearly. But what I will say in a nutshell is this whole system of religious apartheid in Pakistan, what that has done, firstly, it robbed the vision of the founder of Pakistan and all of those who founded Pakistan. So Pakistan, the idea of Pakistan was hijacked which was a country for the Muslims of India, but a country where all would be equal. Because the Muslims of India were fleeing, what they thought was going to be persecution. And we see some of that today in India. So with the system of apartheid, I would say that the purification obsession, the more every government, whether it was a government which was elected by the people, or whether it was a military government, every government sought to bond the voters with them through combining religion and politics, which we know is the most dangerous mix. And what we have ended up with this purification process is a country where, from Zia-ul-Haq, where he created basically the first internal extremist terrorist group to target Shias, to today, where we see the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, a Barelvi sect, targeting, murdering, lynching members of the Ahmadi community and all those who they feel have committed blasphemy in their eyes. And let's not forget, the Tehreek-e-Labbaik won votes in the last elections. They won many seats in the last elections. So you know what this apartheid has done, what these laws have done? What they've done in 7+ decades is change the mindset of the people of Pakistan, affect it. And you know, with the hatred in the textbooks, the hatred in schools, the hatred in every institution, government institution in Pakistan, towards the Ahmadi community, what we are seeing today is a brutalization, and I will end, because we have a big panel, with one example. It started with, for example, an Ahmadi Muslim not being able to say Assalamu alaikum. Here in America, when we meet each other, our first greeting is Assalamu alaikum. It's about a greeting of peace, a greeting of fellowship, a greeting of commonality. So from that to not being able to give the call to prayer, not being able to call your mosque a mosque, to all of those things that started the desecration of Ahmadiyya graveyards. First, it was scratching out any prayers from the Holy Quran on those headstones. Today, they are digging up the bodies of dead Ahmadis. They're digging them up. This is a sign of an otherization, a hatred that has been inculcated. It has been formed. It has been created. It became the business of the state. I also, my Christian brothers and sisters, my Hindu brothers and sisters, who I've also worked a great deal with in Pakistan, they suffer greatly too. But this special hatred for people within the Muslim sect who chose to practice differently. I mean, this was brought up, I believe, by you, Katrina, perhaps, but in America, if, for example, an evangelical does not believe a Mormon or a person, a Scientologist or anyone else is a Christian, they can believe it, they can say it, but can they legally do anything about it? No, they can't. And if they try to bring any harm to someone of that faith, there will be extreme reaction from the state. So that is the difference between a country where religion is open and free for everyone, but the legal structure does not discriminate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Knox, I want to go to you next. You're an expert on international religious freedom. You've seen different types of restrictions on faith around the world. How do you see Pakistan's decision to impose a religious test for voting, for passports, for ID cards in that global context?
Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here again. And it's also, in a certain sense, sad that we're gathering together, which means that the issues that we discussed last year and we discuss every year are still as pernicious as ever before. Pakistan is unique in a number of ways, some very positive, beautiful ones, everything from jingle trucks to just the vibrancy of the society and its diversity. But at the same time, Pakistan sort of leads the world in a race to the bottom in finding new and unique ways to persecute religious minorities. As someone who's trained in international law and spent a lot of time looking at different legal systems and how they deal with religion and recognizing it, Pakistan, to my knowledge, is the only country in the world whose constitution doesn't define what religion the country is, but also defines what religion the country isn't. And it's that extra step that's purposely targeted at your community that I think really sets Pakistan apart in a number of ways, all to the detriment of the country and your community. And I think the long evolution of this system since 1974, I believe, when Prime Minister Bhutto had the Second Amendment passed, has led to all these sort of permutations of just finding new ways to, I like how you were saying at this purification obsession, like how do we one-up one another? And I think this gets to the part of the challenge of grappling with Pakistan is that it is a hybrid government system. It is democratic, but there is a deep state. And so politicians often run to the far right, and bashing your community is a vote getter for a lot of people. I mean, I think what we saw with Mr. Rivzi and TLP when there was just this very minor change to the election standards, they were able to rally thousands of people into the streets, demonstrates why politicians are afraid to go much further. I think as someone who's met with the Pakistanis, I was the first diplomat to go meet with them in Islamabad after the Trump administration designated them as a CPC. It became clear to me that the only way we're going to move Pakistan forward isn't going to be through shaming them, because I think they're beyond shame. There's actually a domestic constituency that likes this stuff that we're all horrified by. So it's going to be, how do we increase the pain to change the internal calculations. And I don't think Pakistan's ever paid a real price for the internal repression on a whole score of human rights issues, but particularly religious freedom issues. So the FATF gray list, the CPC mechanism has a waiver. We've never used Magnitsky in any kind of meaningful way to target the officials who we know are leading the persecution charge. The Europeans have GSP+. That's a huge source of leverage that gets wasted every year. And then all of us have visas. Like, we can make a decision to limit who comes into our countries and signal to Pakistan as a country, as a society, that we don't want people who advocate hate and violence against religious minorities. I remember you coming to my office and to say that the United States had let in some of its radical preachers who were preaching the most awful anti-Ahmadi stuff. And like, how did we let that happen? So that's another tool. I think we've got plenty of tools to try to move the deep state to address these ills that we have yet to had the courage or the fortitude to really address. And that's what I think we need all to be thinking about.
Excellent. Thank you. Those are excellent constructive suggestions. I want to turn to you, Michael. From your perch as a specialist in Pakistan and its political system, how do you believe that system has been shaped by a legal regime that sorts anyone that is in the country seeking to vote, seeking to hold office according to their religion as prescribed by the government?
Yeah, thanks. So first of all, I thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be on a panel like this. To your question, to cut to the chase, so to speak, that those in the political system in Pakistan accommodate and appease the religious forces that the legal regime empowers. I mean, it's as simple as that. And sort of three examples on that front. One is that the state, the political figures, the military as well, routinely give in to the demands of religious parties, well, specifically in recent years, the TLP. When it's on the street, doing their protests, shutting down Islamabad and other cities, invariably the state gives in. I mean, that's just what happens. And it's sort of related to that as well. The political leadership of the day will always aim to keep out of politics those labeled by dominant religious actors as undesirables. And I think the best example here is something that may have been mentioned earlier a few years ago when the Imran Khan government had this economic advisory committee, and a brilliant economist had been appointed to the council, but he happened to be an Ahmadi, and for that reason, pressure was on to remove him, and so he never served on it. And after that happened, a number of friends of mine in Pakistan told me that was a moment when they realized that something was really, really wrong here, right? I mean, when you can't have a brilliant economist, Tif Mia, who's been at Princeton for many years, when he's not able to participate on this critical commission to try to address a critical challenge in Pakistan, economic crisis, because of his religion, that's just not right. Something is really wrong there. Second point on this is that we have seen the state use religious forces as state assets, right? This is not a new story. We look at how the state has used these Islamist terror groups, from the Haqqani network to the Lashkar-e-Taiba, many in between. We know the full story there. And finally, there is a tendency for political leaders and for the state to cater to these religious forces politically and draw on their political strength as well. So here, if you look at the history of electoral politics in Pakistan, you do have a history of the mainstream parties allying themselves on the campaign trail with terrorist organizations. And I think one of the more notable examples, I can't remember exactly what year this was, but a prominent political figure who is now the Pakistani Interior Minister, Rana Sanaullah, he was campaigning with a political candidate from Sipahi Sahaba, which of course is a vicious sectarian extremist group that later grew into Lashkar-e Jangvi and so forth. He was sharing the stage with someone from that party. And what does that say about where things stand? It's not the only example either. So I'll end there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So, Amir Sahib, you come at this from the vantage point of a scholar. And I want to pick up on something that Imran Khan, who many of you will be familiar with, who was until recently Prime Minister of Pakistan, until he was notoriously ousted from that position. He often would speak of what in Pakistan is known as the Riyasat-e-Madina, which is the city-state that was established by the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam, peace be upon him, in the 7th century. And he would say that it was his dream to establish a modern version of that city-state in contemporary Pakistan. And importantly for this conversation, in Imran Khan's vision, and he at one point went on camera and spoke of the importance of the Second Amendment, which excluded Ahmadis from this fold of Islam, in fact was prompted, had a bit of a hostage video feel. It was prompted by the incident involving Atif Mia and how the government had to backtrack at that point and then appease the clerics, just as Michael was mentioning. And in his vision, the status of Ahmadis as non-Muslim under the Constitution and the denial of basic fundamental citizenship rights to them, including the right to vote, was an essential pillar of this supposed Riyasat-e-Madina that he was putting forward. Now, turning to you as a scholar of Islam, is that how you see it? What is your view of the Charter of Medina and the state under which it was established?
Jazakumullah. Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين وخاتم النبيين محمد المصطفى صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. بداية كنت أظن أن محاكم التفتيش انتهت، لكنها للأسف ما زالت موجودة.
First of all, I thought that the acquisitions has ended, but unfortunately, it seems that it's still here.
نفس العالم الذي كان لا مباليا نائفي في الهولوكوست هو نفس العالم اليوم.
The same word who did not care during the Holocaust is present today.
ليس فقط من يسن هذه القوانين الإجرامية، بل الناس الذين يسكتون. الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: الكاتم عن الحق شيطان أخرس.
Not only those rulers and legislators who made these rules and laws, but also the general public who keep silent. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, said that the person who did not speak out is a silent Satan.
عن الحق. فهم عمران خان يخالف تماما القرآن الكريم والسنة النبوية المطهرة وبالتحديد ميثاق المدينة.
The understanding of the President Umar Khan of Pakistan, Imran Khan of Pakistan, of the Charter of Al-Madinah go fully against the teaching of the Holy Quran and the practice of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him.
حيث ميثاق المدينة أعطى حرية تامة كاملة لجميع المواطنين بغض النظر عن دينهم وقوميتهم.
The Charter of Al-Madinah gave full freedom to all its citizens, regardless of their religious affiliations.
وخاصة القبائل اليهودية التي عاشت في المدينة.
And especially the Jewish tribes who were living in the city.
وهناك الكثير من المستشرقين والباحثين ومنهم اليهود أيضا والإسرائيليين حيث كتبوا عن ميثاق المدينة وكيف أن اليهود عاشوا نتيجة ميثاق المدينة في كل العالم الإسلامي بحرية تامة كاملة.
And there are a lot of people, scholars and writers, and among them also from different faiths, including Jewish, who wrote how peaceful all these people lived under the Charter of Al-Madinah.
رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عندما طلب الإحصاء في المدينة قال: اكتبوا لي من تلفظ بالإسلام.
The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, when he asked for a survey to count people in the city, he asked them only write down who self-declare themselves as Muslim.
لم يقل اذهبوا وتجسسوا على الناس.
He did not say spy on people.
ولا انظروا هل يصلون أو لا يصلون.
Or if they pray or not.
أو ماذا يؤمنون أو لا يؤمنون.
And in what they believe or not.
لأن القرآن الكريم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يشتكي إلى الله ويقول: وقيله يا رب إن هؤلاء قوم لا يؤمنون. فالله يجيب الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم: فاصفح عنهم وقل سلام فسوف يعلمون.
So the Holy Prophet prayed in the Holy Quran mentioned that the Holy Prophet prayed, I swear by his repeated cry, O my Lord, that these are people who will not believe. What should I do with them? Therefore, God answered, therefore turn aside from them and say peace, and soon shall they know.
وباللغة العربية لا يؤمنون ليس فقط كفار بل أعداء لا يدعونني بأمن وأمان.
And do not believe in the Holy Quran is not the disbelievers. It is any enemy from outside who is not leaving me live in peace.
فممنوع منعا باتا لأي دولة أو حكومة أن تتدخل في إيمان ودين المواطنين.
According to the teaching of the Holy Quran, it is strictly forbidden for any government or state to interfere in the belief of its citizens.
هذا هو الذي المسبب الأول لخلخلة الأمن والاستقرار والسلام في الدول وفي العالم.
This is the first cause of the destabilization of the peace across the world and everywhere.
داعش لم تنزل من السماء.
ISIS did not come from the sky.
هي نتيجة تعليم خاطئ للدين.
It was created due to wrong teaching of the religion.
وإذا لم نضع إصبعنا على المشكلة
And if we don't point to the problem,
سوف تستمر وتنشأ نزاعات وخلافات ومعاناة في مناطق أخرى في العالم.
more problem and suffering will be seen elsewhere in the world.
Thank you so much. Katrina, I was listening to your opening remarks, and you spoke beautifully about the impossible position that Ahmadis are put in to have to choose between their deeply held faith and their sacred obligation as citizens. Can you speak a bit more about the interplay, as you see it, between religious freedom and citizenship? If we care about strengthening citizenship, then should we pay attention to the state of religious freedom?
Absolutely. I spoke earlier, I can't remember which session it was, but there is a powerful body of social science research that shows that societies that protect freedom of religion, conscience, and belief almost invariably protect the whole range of other fundamental rights that we cherish so much: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of association, you name it. They are very linked, and the converse is true. But what I don't think I said, and what I would like to emphasize, is that religion, I believe, in the context of a rule of law system, is almost always a social tonic. It is something that strengthens and benefits society writ large. It is true that we have seen circumstances and situations in which religion can become a toxin, but it becomes a toxin when it is growing in the context of repression, when it is growing in the context of social division, of apartheid, of all of these other social ills. But when sincere faith is allowed to flourish in a system that is democratic, that is pluralistic, and that is conducted according to the rule of law, it is almost invariably a notable social good. It is something that strengthens the caliber, the forward-lookingness, the liberality, not in a political sense, but in that inclusive sense of society. And so, again, this speaks to how profoundly wrong and violative of fundamental rights it is that in Pakistan now, this community is required basically to betray their own integrity, to betray their deepest faith commitments in order to fulfill one of their most important societal commitments. But absolutely, religion is a tonic and a blessing to society in the context of democracy, pluralism, and the rule of law.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I have several more prepared questions, but I also recognize that we are running up on time and would obviously love to have the audience participate in this conversation. So if there are any questions at this time, please feel free to raise your hand. G, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Katrina and Knox. I'm proud of, as a General Secretary of IHRC, yet you have been helping the Ahmadiyya community since many, many years. And as you said, Katrina, I'm a proud Swede also. A Swedish politician also, and Swedish. You mentioned about your father and how Raoul Wallenberg helped at that time, and I'm proud of it, At this time, I, as a Swede, asking the American government and all the citizens from the other governments sitting here, this is the time now when some of the governments clearing Pakistan to go out of that gray list. They have cleared Pakistan nearly just 1 week ago. They declared that Pakistan has fulfilled all the obligations, all the things what they asked from the terrorist list, from all these Lashkar-e-Taiba, all these organizations are clear now. They're not doing nothing. But what we see, as Farahnaz just mentioned, it gives pain. When we hear just some days ago, one of the members sitting here also, one of his loved ones' grave was dug up and the body was thrown out of that. And that was done in the presence of police and by one of the notorious organization. And they have announced Lashkar-e-Taiba. No, this Tehreek-e-Labbaik. So this is my personal request to you, to Katrina, and not especially to you and all others sitting here from other governments, the officials, that within some weeks, a delegation is going to Pakistan, give them the clearance, whereas Ahmadi don't have any basic right. As very rightly Amjad said and Mahmood said, if you have to take a SIM, anywhere you have to go, you need your ID card. You have to tell lie for that. They are insisting in the Ahmadiyya Muslim to tell lie that I am not Muslim. So this gives pain to us, as we are sitting outside from the last many years, So we cannot visit at that way, as an independent human being. So this is my request to you, not a question. This is my personal request to you. I have come right from Sweden here to tell you people, now this is a time we are asking government of Pakistan, Knox, you wrote, Katrina especially, the Pakistani should repel these laws, blasphemy laws, all this. This is we are asking from Pakistan. Now it is up to us now that what we are going to declare, giving Pakistan a green chit. So now please work on it, I have sent you the details just last night, and to you also, more.
Well, just one very quick response. When governments are behaving badly, it is the job of activists, other governments, journalists, and others to make the cost of the bad behavior too high to continue. You have to attach a cost to the destructive, undemocratic, persecutory behavior. And, we aren't doing that, but we need to. And I especially agree with you, Nasim, that we need to have at every level of government, members of Congress, members of the administration, delegations that go over. Everybody needs to raise this issue and say Pakistan cannot be considered part of the community of decent nations as long as it is targeting the Ahmadiyya community in this way. If every time every Pakistani political leader, politician, jurist, academic, you name it, went anywhere, the first question they got from the press, from an audience if they were speaking, from their interlocutor in governmental meetings was, what's going on is not okay with the Ahmadiyya community. It is a violation of international law. It's a violation of your responsibilities under a range of international human rights treaties. There comes a time when you sort of get a critical mass, and amongst themselves, you talked about the deep state, they start saying, this is costing us. It's not pleasant for us everywhere we go to be assailed by this constant attack on our legitimacy over this. Is it really worth it to us? So we have to raise the cost. And those of us in the human rights community are doing it, but it's not being done enough. There shouldn't be a single congressional delegation that goes to Pakistan where they aren't raising it in an obnoxious way. I'm sort of glad I'm not in the State Department. I know Knox was there. I know others have been in the State Department, but there's so much diplo speak. And I think what Pakistan needs to hear is non-diplo speak. They need to hear tough, honest, hard-hitting speech that says you are behaving in many ways like an outlaw nation. We cannot consider you legitimate insofar as you continue to target this peaceful member of your nation.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. I'm going to sort of try to synthesize what you just said, Katrina, and Knox, you were talking earlier about the various tools that we have at our disposal. But Michael, I think I'll bring you back in because you're our Pakistan hand, so to speak. We have an election cycle coming up in Pakistan. Between the panelists, you all discussed the 2017 minor amendment to the election law, the backlash that resulted from that, and how it made the discourse even more corrosive, and then the incident with Atif Mian. How do you think that this issue of religion, of Ahmadis, of citizenship rights for Ahmadis is going to play out in this campaign? And then to the point that Katrina and Knox made, are there ways that the incentive structures for politicians and other actors can be altered to mitigate some of those tendencies that we're likely to see coming up in the coming months?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll say this, and it'll sound like a contradiction, but it's not. This election campaign will not be about religion, but religion will be a big part of the election campaign. So what I mean by that is that those of you that know what's been playing out in Pakistan in recent months, there's a serious economic crisis. There's the environment is incredibly polarized right now, in that the previous Imran Khan government, or Imran Khan himself, had accused any opponent of being a traitor. And so that sort of played into this deepening polarization. The campaign rhetoric is going to be about the economy. It's also going to be about issues of corruption, which has always been a big deal for Imran Khan. And it's going to be discussion about foreign policy as well, given that the current government is, of course, accused by the previous government of working with the U.S. to overthrow Imran Khan. That doesn't leave any type of space for these types of issues. Even under ordinary circumstances, I doubt that these types of issues would come out in an election campaign, but particularly now with the country and the political environment especially polarized. And what I mean about religion being a big part of the election, even if the election won't be about religion, is the TLP factor. And we've all heard about it. We've all discussed it, Tehreek-e-Labbaik, Pakistan. Just to have to emphasize, this is a relatively new religious political party that was not around until relatively recently. But it has been mainstreamed in the sense that it is not a banned party. It had been at one point, but it's not now. It's been mainstream. It's allowed to run in elections, as I think Farah had mentioned. Unlike most religious political parties in Pakistan, it has been able to do fairly well in the booth. It has received a fair number of votes in some of these previous local elections. And we know what TLP is all about. I mean, this is a party that it may not be a violent organization, but its ideology is very violent and explicitly hostile to the Ahmadi community. We know it revolves around the issue of blasphemy and the blasphemy laws, and we know that the Ahmadi community has been victimized by those for so long. So the fact that you're going to have the TLP involved in these elections suggests that any discourse, any rhetoric about the types of issues we're talking about today is going to go in the absolute opposite direction that we would want it to go in. And just to emphasize, if you look at what's played out over the last few years since the TLP emerged, cases of attacks on Ahmadis, you've had specific cases where TLP operatives are engaging in proselytizing or protests, and after those cases happen, you have incidents where Ahmadis have been assaulted and attacked. This has been chronicled. So this is a very, very dangerous organization. We could talk about what to deal with it, but the fact that it's going to be involved in this election campaign is very troubling.
I'm just going to jump in here and add something to what Michael was saying. I just spent 2 months in Pakistan. I've got a very good read of what's going on the ground. The country is facing probably the worst economic and political challenges it ever has. Now, as someone born in Pakistan who loves my country, do I want to put more pressure at this very delicate moment? But as someone who works for religious freedom, as someone who works on human rights, as someone who cares about those who do not have anyone to speak for them, I agree with Knox and Katrina. Right now, there's the IMF, to look at, there's FATF to look at. There are a lot of avenues where the Americans and the rest of the world who believe in human rights and these basic freedoms could use this opportunity not to bully Pakistan, but to say, hey, you play ball on this and we can help you return to the civilized world, return to a world where you're not breeding terrorists. So I think it's a win-win for Pakistan, for the army, for the political, and most of all, for the people and stability of the country. So I think it's time to push.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We have to make way for the next event. Really appreciate it.